This spiritual symptom only appears in powerful awakened souls. 1. When the ordinary begins to break, prepare yourself. Because what you're about to feel is not just a message, it's a mirror. Not everyone is meant to see it. Fewer still are meant to feel it, and those who do, they're not just changing, they're remembering something ancient, something buried, something true. This doesn't begin with a lightning bolt. It doesn't arrive with a chant, a ceremony, or procedure. It begins when your life suddenly starts to lose its edges, like fog spilling over a cliff. Something quiet starts to flood your awareness. You're at the grocery store, checking the time, listening to someone talk about their day, and out of nowhere, a thought cuts through the noise like a whisper you've heard before. None of this feels real anymore. At first, you ignore it. You shake it off, chalk it up to being tired, to needing a vacation, to too much caffeine. You tell yourself that maybe you just need to reconnect with your goals. Organize your schedule, get inspired. But deep inside, you know that isn't it. Because this isn't about stress, this isn't about burnout. This is the beginning of the unraveling, the slow, sacred dismantling of the story you were told to live. What you're feeling is not confusion. It's not detachment. It's initiation. In ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, students weren't taught through lectures or books. They were led through experiences that shattered their old perceptions. To the outside world, it looked like madness. To the soul, it was purification, the old self rooted in illusion. Ego, an inherited identity, had to dissolve so the true self could rise. And that's what's happening to you now. Without temples, without ritual, without permission. You begin to sense it when your daily routines lose their meaning. The emails, the deadlines, the goals, they all start to feel like echoes of a life that was scripted by someone else. A life you once chased like it meant everything, now feels like it holds nothing. That's because you've outgrown the map. The coordinates no longer match the destination. And your soul quietly, patiently has started tugging at the thread. This is the first layer of awakening that most never talk about. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's invisible. It doesn't scream, it hums. It shows up as a quiet ache, a subtle misalignment, a nagging sense that the person you've been is only a fraction of who you truly are. You begin to notice how your conversations feel hollow. You speak, but the words feel borrowed. You laugh, but it doesn't reach your eyes. You look around at your life, and something inside you whispers, "I built all this, but it no longer holds me." And here's what makes it so sacred. This feeling is not a crisis. It's a departure. You are not breaking down. You are breaking out. You see, in the teachings of Plotinus, the great Neoplatonist philosopher, he described the soul as something divine that descended into form and forgot its origin. Life, for most, is a forgetting. But for a rare few, something happens that reverses the descent. A spark returns. The soul begins to ascend, not by leaving the world, but by waking up within it. You're not becoming lost. You're becoming lucid. This stage is rarely celebrated because it doesn't look like progress. It looks like confusion, discontent, disillusionment. But this is not the end. It is the sacred middle, the chrysalis phase, the moment between identities where you've shed the old but haven't yet seen the new. It is uncomfortable. It is disorienting, but it is holy. Most people will never reach this layer. Not because they're incapable, but because the moment discomfort arises, they rush to patch it, to medicate it, to drown it in productivity, distraction, validation. But you feel it. You sit with it. You begin to listen. And that's how it starts. You'll begin to notice your mind pushing against it, urging you to snap out of it, telling you that you're being irrational, that you should be grateful, that nothing's really wrong. But deep down, you know everything's changed, even if nothing around you has. It's like walking through a house you built, but the walls feel foreign. The rooms echo in a new frequency. The decorations mean nothing. You've inhabited this space for years, and yet now, it feels like a museum of someone you used to be. That's when you know your soul has moved ahead of your life, and that misalignment is not a mistake. It's a message, because what most call discomfort, the mystics called the call to return. Return not to comfort, but to origin, to essence, to the undistorted frequency of self. This is not about destroying your life. It's about releasing what was built without your soul's consent, the identities you wore to be accepted, the goals you chased to feel worthy, the roles you played to feel safe. None of it was wrong. It brought you here. But now, it's asking to be shed, because what's coming next can't be built on old blueprints. You're not just awakening, you're being chosen. And that doesn't mean you're better. It means your soul is ready to live in resonance with truth, not expectation, ready to create from depth, not duty, ready to embody purpose, not performance. And once this layer unfolds, you can't go back. Even if you try, the illusion loses its glue, the mask begins to itch, and pretending becomes unbearable. That's the sign you've crossed the threshold. From this point forward, every part of you that was built for someone else's comfort will begin to fall away. And while that may feel like loss, it's actually the return of something ancient. You, the real you. And that's just the beginning. When the familiar no longer feels like home. But once you begin to remember who you are, something else happens. It doesn't come with warning. It doesn't ask for permission. It arrives quietly, like a subtle breeze that changes direction. And just as you begin reclaiming your own truth, you start to notice something even more unsettling. The people around you no longer speak your language. At first, you think it's just a bad day, a miscommunication. Maybe you're distracted, maybe they're tired, but the feeling persists. Conversations that once felt easy now feel scripted. Laughter that once flowed freely feels hollow. Eye contact becomes effort. Energy becomes misaligned. You look across the table at someone you've known for years, and suddenly, it's as if you're looking through glass. This isn't judgment, it's resonance. You are not above them. You are not better, you're just shifting. And that shift changes everything. In Hermetic philosophy, CT, there is a concept called vibrational correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. When your inner vibration rises, the outer world responds. The people who once matched your frequency may no longer harmonize with your new tone. This isn't personal. It's energetic physics. You begin to feel this dissonance most with those who were once closest to you. Not because they've changed, but because you have. What you once tolerated, you now notice. What you once agreed with, you now question. What once felt safe now feels suffocating, and it hurts. It's one thing to outgrow a job or a city, but to outgrow a connection, a friendship, a partnership, that's a grief few are prepared for. Because no one warns you that spiritual awakening often comes with relational shedding. People begin to pull away not with malice, but with misalignment. They can't feel you the same way anymore. Or rather, they feel too much of you, your depth, your clarity, your refusal to perform, and it unsettles them. They want the version of you who played along, the one who didn't ask uncomfortable questions, the one who didn't glow quite so brightly. But that version is gone, and now you stand in a strange in-between, too different to blend in, not yet clear enough to fully stand out, alone in a crowd, awake in a room that's still asleep. This phase is treacherous, not because you are lost, but because you are between identities, between frequencies, between tribes. You begin to understand what the mystics meant when they spoke of the narrow path. It's not just about righteousness. It's about vibration. You're walking a road that few are tuned to walk with you, so you'll be tempted to go back, to shrink, to simplify, to bite your tongue, to laugh when it isn't funny, to stay in rooms that no longer fit you just to feel seen. But something in you refuses. That something is sacred, because the soul doesn't compromise. It doesn't negotiate in the currency of approval. It doesn't shrink to be palatable. The more you awaken, the more you start to feel this soul integrity rise in you. It becomes harder to fake it. You start excusing yourself from gatherings without knowing why. You lose interest in gossip, in noise, in small talk. You crave realness, you crave stillness, you crave connection over conversation. This withdrawal can feel like exile, but it's not. It's recalibration. The universe is not punishing you. It is preparing you, rearranging your energetic ecosystem, releasing relationships that no longer nourish your becoming. Not because those people are bad, but because your soul is calling in alignment over attachment. And here's the hardest part. Some of the people you lose may never understand why. They'll say you changed, you became cold, you disappeared, and no matter how gently you try to explain, they won't hear it, because they're not tuned to your new frequency. And that's okay. You are not here to drag anyone into awakening. You are here to honor the pull of your own truth. Let them misunderstand you. Let them go if they must. Because what's on the other side of this letting go is not loneliness, it's resonance. It's space for soul connections to emerge. For people who meet you with clarity, not confusion. With reverence, not resistance. With depth, not demands. This is the secret blessing of this painful layer. As you clear the old, the new begins to shimmer at the edges of your life. You meet someone and it feels like remembering. A conversation flows and you feel seen, not just your words but your essence. You realize that you were never too much. You were just too deep for shallow water. But to get there, you had to wade through the silence, the solitude, the void between frequencies. That void is not punishment, it is passage. So if you're here now, if your circle is shrinking, if your voice feels too loud for the room, if your presence makes others squirm, don't shrink. Shine. Because what you're losing isn't love, it's illusion. And what you're stepping into isn't isolation, it's alignment. 3. When the world becomes too loud to bear. And just when you think you've adjusted to the solitude, just as you begin making peace with disconnection, another shift begins. It doesn't feel spiritual at first. It feels physical, tangible, raw. The world, once familiar, suddenly becomes unbearable. Rooms feel crowded even when they're empty. Lights feel harsh even when they're soft. Voices feel sharp even when they're kind. You walk into a space and your body tightens. Your senses go on alert. You can't explain it, but you feel everything. This isn't anxiety. This isn't introversion. This is energetic sensitivity, and it's one of the most sacred symptoms of awakening for those who are being chosen. The world doesn't just look different, it feels different. In ancient Taoist teachings, there's a concept called qi sensitivity, a state where the internal energy system becomes so attuned that it can detect the subtlest shifts in external energy. It's not supernatural, it's natural. You're not developing a power. You're removing a numbness, and once it's gone, everything becomes amplified. You walk into a shopping mall and your nervous system feels like it's under siege. You pass someone on the street and absorb their sorrow without a word. You hear a song, and it moves through your bones like an ancient memory. This can feel overwhelming, disorienting. It can make you question your strength. But here's the truth. This is not weakness, it's refinement. You're not becoming fragile. You're becoming finely tuned. Because the world you used to navigate with your mind, you're now navigating with your field, and your field doesn't lie. That's why you begin to pull back. Not because you're scared, but because your body knows what your mind hasn't caught up to yet. Not every space is safe. Not every interaction is neutral. Not every invitation deserves your energy. You begin to seek silence not to hide, but to heal. You crave nature not for leisure, but for recalibration. You spend hours alone not from loneliness, but from sacred necessity. It is during this phase that your relationship with energy becomes central. You no longer ask, "Do I like this?" You ask, "Does this feel aligned?" You stop trying to fit in. You start listening to your nervous system, to the tingle, the tightness, the pull, the peace. Because your body has become an instrument, and that instrument is now playing in higher frequencies. This is why you may feel exhausted in social situations you once enjoyed. Why conversations feel draining instead of nourishing. Why technology overstimulates you. Why noise feels violent. Why even your diet begins to shift without effort. You're not broken. You're just not built for chaos anymore. Your soul is creating space. Space for clarity. Space for intuition. Space for subtle awareness. In Vedic philosophy, there is a concept known as sattva, a state of purity and clarity of mind. It is the natural state of the awakened being. But to access it, the mind must be freed from distraction. The senses must be cleansed of overindulgence. The energy must be restored to simplicity. That's what your soul is doing now, purifying your field. And while others may call you antisocial, distant, sensitive, or strange, you begin to understand that this new way of being is not dysfunction. It's discernment. Because once you feel the dissonance of misaligned energy, you can't unfeel it. You notice the tension in a smile that doesn't match the eyes, the manipulation in a compliment that seeks control, the emptiness in conversations that never go below the surface, and you realize you no longer have the capacity to pretend. This is the moment you stop letting guilt dictate your boundaries. The moment you stop proving your worth through availability. The moment you realize that energy is your most sacred currency and not everyone can afford your light. It's also the moment when your world begins to shrink again, not in limitation, but in precision. You don't need 20 friends. You need 2 who see you. You don't need endless noise. You need one moment of stillness. You don't need validation. You need alignment. And the more you honor this sensitivity, the more your intuition sharpens. You begin sensing things before they happen. You feel a truth before it's spoken. You anticipate change before it arrives. And while you may not always understand it, you begin to trust it. Because the more quiet you become, the more you can hear the universe within you. And from that stillness, something ancient begins to emerge. The knowing that you were never meant to numb yourself, to fit into a world designed for disconnection. You were meant to be a sensor of truth. And with that responsibility comes clarity. Not everyone will feel you, not everyone will stay, but those who do, they won't drain you, they'll resonate. And that resonance is worth every moment of isolation that preceded it. So if the world feels loud right now, if your skin crawls in crowded spaces, if your heart tightens around dissonant energy, if your senses feel overwhelmed, you are not losing your mind. You're finding your signal. Let it sharpen. Let it guide you. Let it build the boundaries that will protect your truth in a world that still worships noise. Because chosen ones don't just navigate energy, they become it. 4. When you no longer want to win by the time your senses have sharpened and your inner world has become your compass, something peculiar begins to unfold. At first, it seems harmless, subtle, like a shift in the wind, but soon it grows louder, more undeniable. The drive you once had, the edge, the hunger, the fire to prove, to conquer, to win, begins to vanish. Not because you've lost ambition, not because you've become lazy, but because you're waking up to a deeper truth. You were never here to compete. You begin to notice it during moments that used to thrill you. Recognition, awards, praise, attention, success. These once felt like nectar. Now they feel like noise. You hit a goal and feel nothing. You receive applause and wonder why it echoes hollow. This isn't depression. This isn't fatigue. It's release. Your soul is gently withdrawing from a game it never agreed to play. In the ancient Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches Arjuna, you have the right to action, but not to the fruits of action. It's a lesson whispered into the hearts of the awakened. Do not attach to outcomes. Serve the action itself. Let purpose replace performance. Let service replace status. This is what begins to bloom inside of you now. You still care. You still create. You still show up, but not to impress, not to dominate, not to win. You no longer want to be the best, you want to be real. You want to feel aligned. You want to do things that matter, not just things that are measurable. And for the ego, this is terrifying, because for so long, it ran the show. It told you what success meant. It calculated your value by metrics, followers, income, achievements, applause. It built ladders for you to climb and told you that higher was better. But now, something inside you has stepped off the ladder, not because you gave up, but because you realized the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. You are not here to compete. You are here to contribute. And in that realization, a new rhythm begins to guide you. You find yourself creating art without needing it to trend. You speak your truth without checking who's listening. You work from joy, not urgency. You show up to serve, not to be seen. And strangely, life begins to flow with less friction. You lose the need to defend your value. You stop grasping for title. You step away from spaces where you have to hustle for your worth. Because your soul knows something now. What is truly yours cannot be earned, it can only be remembered. In this phase, you may feel like you've lost your edge, like you're fading, like you no longer fit into the frameworks of ambition that once fueled you. But the truth is, you haven't lost your edge. You've outgrown it. The edge was sharp because you needed protection. Now, you need presence. Your energy no longer wants to pierce, it wants to penetrate. Gently, deeply, purposefully. You are no longer interested in creating noise. You are interested in creating resonance. And that kind of impact doesn't always look like success. It often looks like quiet influence, invisible healing, ripples you may never see. This is where chosen ones begin to walk a different path, a quieter one, a more sacred one. While others chase attention, you chase authenticity. While others seek leverage, you seek liberation. You start asking different questions. Is this aligned with who I am? Does this nourish my soul or just feed my ego? Would I still do this if no one ever knew? And in answering those questions, your life begins to reshape itself. You notice that competition feels like contraction, that striving feels like separation, that validation feels like a trap. Because deep down, your soul is no longer trying to win, it's trying to wake up. And once that becomes your North Star, the landscape changes. You begin to step out of systems that demand your performance and into spaces that honor your presence. You walk into a room, not needing to dominate it, but to bless it. You stop measuring your worth by your output. You stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. You no longer fear being unseen. You fear being untrue. And that shift changes everything. Because now, when you create, it flows. When you speak, it lands. When you work, it heals. Your actions stop chasing approval and start generating alignment. And ironically, it is here where you no longer seek success that true fulfillment begins. Because the soul doesn't need to win. It needs to remember. It needs to reveal. It needs to resonate. So if you're here now, if you felt your drive soften, your ambition quiet, your hunger shift, don't panic. You're not fading. You're focusing. You are becoming more than a competitor. You are becoming a channel. 5. When time stops making sense. At some point in your journey, after the noise quiets, after the striving fades, after the spaces once familiar begin to echo with distance, you begin to notice something else. It sneaks in quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. A sense that time is no longer behaving the way it used to. You look at the clock and realize an hour has passed, though it felt like 5 minutes. Or perhaps you sit for what feels like hours only to find the clock has barely moved. This is more than distraction. This is not poor attention. It's not mental fog. What you are experiencing is something far more ancient. You are stepping out of linear time. You're not imagining it. You're awakening to a deeper layer of consciousness, one where the soul no longer obeys the tick of the clock, but begins to attune itself to something older, truer, and infinitely more alive, the eternal present. In Hermetic philosophy, time is not a straight line, it's a spiral. The Kabbalion speaks of rhythm and correspondence, how all phenomena follow cycles, how moments echo moments, how what once was returns again, but never in quite the same way. The idea that everything happens in its own season is not poetic, it is law. And once your soul begins to awaken, that law becomes your lived experience. You find yourself remembering things that never happened, sensing futures you haven't lived yet, dreaming of people you haven't met, but somehow already know. You begin to realize that time isn't something you move through. It's something that moves through you. This shift is both liberating and disorienting. You begin to resist calendars, routines, 5-year plans. They feel artificial, like trying to cage a river. Your mind still tries to cling. Shouldn't I have reached this milestone by now? But your body knows better. It knows there's a different clock now, one set not by society, but by the pulse of your becoming. This is where frustration often arises. You try to act as you once did: checklists, productivity, performance, but something inside refuses. You feel heavy, unmotivated, disconnected from the race you used to run. And you wonder, what's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong. Everything is reorienting. You are no longer driven by urgency. You are being summoned by alignment. You'll begin to notice that things don't happen when you push. They happen when you pause. Ideas don't come under pressure. They arrive in stillness. Conversations don't bloom when forced. They unfold when invited. The right people show up not on your schedule, but in divine choreography. And that's what this layer teaches you. Synchronicity is the new clock. Once you begin to follow this inner rhythm, strange things start to happen. You think of someone and they call. You ask for guidance and a sign arrives, clear and inexplicable. You delay a trip and suddenly, you avoid an obstacle you didn't know existed. You surrender a plan and what comes instead is more aligned than anything you could have imagined. This is not coincidence. It is not luck. It is resonance. You've become so attuned to your path that your reality begins to respond in real time. You are no longer reacting to life. You are co-creating it. But this dance requires trust, and trust often feels like madness to the mind, because the world around you still believes in control, in timing everything, in setting goals and achieving them on a deadline. But your soul has no interest in artificial timelines. It is eternal. It remembers that growth does not obey clocks, it obeys cycles. Think of a seed. It does not sprout because the calendar says it's spring. It emerges when the soil warms, when the light returns, when the invisible symphony of conditions harmonizes into readiness. And you too are a seed. Your blooming cannot be forced. There will be days when nothing happens. No insights, no momentum, no signs. These are the days of still soil. Trust them. The silence is not emptiness, it is gestation. Then there will be days when everything moves. Doors open, people appear, clarity strikes. In a single hour, you evolve more than in a month of effort. These moments are not magic. They are the result of living in tune. This is the paradox of awakened time. The less you chase it, the more it opens. The less you control it, the more it conspires in your favor. The less you demand, the more you receive. And the more you live this way, the more your relationship to time becomes sacred. You stop rushing. You stop explaining. You stop measuring your worth by what you accomplish each day. Instead, you begin listening to the timing within, the rhythm of your breath, the cycle of your energy, the whispers of your intuition. You begin to notice what hours of the day your clarity is strongest, what seasons your creativity flows, what lunar phases influence your dreams. You live not by the mechanical clock, but by the celestial one, the one etched into your very being. And as this awareness deepens, a beautiful clarity emerges. You are exactly where you are meant to be. No step behind, no leap ahead, right here, right now, perfectly placed in the unfolding of your becoming. This realization is radical in a culture addicted to speed. It feels counterintuitive, even rebellious, but it is the truth. And it is freedom, because when you stop measuring your life by time past, you begin to measure it by presence felt, by truth embodied, by alignment honored. You begin to move through your days not asking, "What should I do next?" but "What is my soul asking for in this moment?" And slowly, gently, your life begins to flow again. Not like a sprint, but like a river, guided not by fear of missing out, but by trust that nothing real can pass you by. And in that river, you find your peace, you find your rhythm, you find your true pace. So if time has stopped making sense, if clocks feel irrelevant, if dates feel meaningless, if plans keep dissolving, don't panic. You are not falling behind. You are falling into rhythm. Let go. Lean in. Trust the current, because time is not your master anymore. It is your mirror. 6. When stillness speaks and your truth can no longer be denied by now. You've walked through the dismantling. You've felt the loneliness, the dissonance, the silence. You've surrendered your urgency, your titles, your timelines, and though nothing looks the same, there's something undeniable rising in you. It doesn't roar. It doesn't rush. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives in stillness. At first, it's just a whisper, a strange pull to be alone, not because you're isolating, not because you're sad, but because something in the quiet calls to you. You cancel plans not out of disinterest, but because your nervous system craves silence. You leave messages unread, not out of avoidance, but because your spirit is tired of noise. This stillness is not emptiness, it's invitation. In ancient desert traditions, prophets did not receive visions in crowds. They received them in caves, in wilderness, in silence so deep that they could finally hear something older than words. And now, that same silence begins to open within you. You walk in nature and feel your breath sync with the wind. You sit in a room alone and feel more accompanied than you ever did at a party. You stop trying to fill the space and realize the space is what's filling you. This is the final layer of the chosen one's path, the sacred return to inner stillness. And from that stillness, something begins to form, not externally, but internally, the sensation, a knowing, a presence. You don't have a name for it, but you can feel it forming in your chest, like light slowly gathering behind the rib cage. It's a mission, a calling, a direction your soul is pointing toward. Not with words, but with resonance. It may not come with details. You may not have a plan, but you can feel the weight of it, gentle but impossible to ignore. You begin to sense, I didn't just come here to heal. I came here to lead. Not in the traditional sense, not with fame or followers or acclaim, but with presence, with clarity, with the kind of energy that shifts a room just by existing in truth. This is where old identities fall away completely, not by force but by irrelevance. You no longer feel the need to explain who you are. You no longer care to argue your beliefs. You no longer dim your light to avoid discomfort. And perhaps most strikingly, you can no longer pretend to be someone you're not. You stop tolerating misalignment in relationships. You stop faking joy in conversations that drain you. You stop dressing up your truth to make it more digestible. Not because you're unkind, but because you're finally real. And realness, in a world built on performance, becomes a form of silent rebellion. You walk differently, speak differently. Your energy no longer conforms, it commands. Without control, you no longer seek to be liked. You seek to be aligned. And in this alignment, a miracle happens. Decisions become simple. Boundaries become natural. Clarity becomes second nature. Because when you no longer have to negotiate your existence, everything else flows. You may still feel fear. Doubt may still visit, but you no longer let those voices sit at your table. You recognize them as remnants of a self that no longer fits. A self that once needed approval to feel safe, that once needed performance to feel seen. But you are no longer that self. You are becoming someone ancient, someone sacred, someone true. This is the stage where solitude becomes your sanctuary, not because you need to hide, but because you need to listen. You realize that stillness is not absence, it is presence without distraction. It is where your spirit recalibrates, where divine intelligence becomes audible, where your assignment begins to crystallize. You may still not know exactly what your mission is. You may only feel pieces, fragments, impressions, but they are enough. You've learned by now that the soul speaks in nudges, not narratives, and the more you trust those nudges, the more life aligns. You stop needing to see the full map. You begin to walk by vibration. You begin to navigate reality with the compass of truth over comfort. You are no longer a seeker. You are becoming a living signal, a transmitter of clarity in a world addicted to confusion, a beacon of grounded power in a culture ruled by appearances, a soul that remembers simply by existing what it means to be fully awake. And here in this final unfolding, you no longer need confirmation. You no longer wait for signs, because your very being has become the sign. You speak less, but your presence says more. You strive less, but your impact deepens. You try less, but your resonance expands. You are no longer participating in the illusion. You are holding a frequency that others forgot was real. And in this, you fulfill your deepest mission not by saving the world, but by remembering yourself so fully that others feel safe to do the same. So if you're here now craving stillness, unable to pretend, hearing whispers of a mission that hasn't yet formed, trust this place. It is not a pause. It is the preparation before emergence. It is where prophets were formed, where initiates became teachers, where ordinary people remembered their divinity. And it is where you remember yours. Let go of the need to be understood. Let go of the need to define your path. Let go of the idea that awakening must be loud, fast, or obvious. Because the most powerful transformations are the quiet ones, the ones that happen in silence, the ones that bloom in darkness, the ones that no one sees until you emerge, radiant and unshakable, no longer carrying your light in your hands, but becoming it entirely.